And we are back with another episode of the Kyle Anzalone Show. Very excited for today's episode. I am going to be rolling solo today, but part of the reason I did that is I want particularly the YouTube chat to throw a few questions at me. I kind of want to know what my audience wants me to talk about. Doesn't even have to be limited to foreign policy. Though throughout the episode, if I say something, you want maybe more details, follow up, throw a question in the chat for me. I really appreciate it if you did that. For everybody in the chat, make sure you're sharing out the show, that you're subscribed on YouTube, and that, you're doing a couple things to help us out here. We are a growing channel, but it's a lot of work to break through the algorithm, especially when you're speaking narratives that the empire doesn't want you guys to hear. So really appreciate all of the support I've gotten for the show. For today's episode, we want to talk about, will Trump bomb Venezuela? Lindsey Graham is actually excited that the U.S. is running out of bombs, and Israel's rape problem. So let's get into this. Let's see what Donald Trump has to say most recently on Venezuela.
It's not that it's not true that you've made a decision on striking inland in Venezuela, but are there actual plans for those strikes in the near future?
Well, how could I answer a question like that? Are there plans for a strike on Venezuela? Who would say that? Supposing there were, would I say that to you honestly? We have very secret plans. Well, who would say that? What kind of a question is it? Look, we'll see what happens with Venezuela. Venezuela sent us thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from prisons, from mental institutions, drug addicts, and so did other countries. That's the bad. Other countries did it too.
So two things I want to break down here. First off, Trump's remarks, where he's saying this is absurd. Nobody should ever say what they're going to do or reveal their hand. Well, the Trump administration has already done that a couple of times. They first leaked to the New York Times that Trump has authorized covert lethal CIA operations in Venezuela. John Kiriakou, the heroic whistleblower who exposed the torture program and also a upper level veteran of the CIA, said on his show that was the first time that had ever been done. So that was really significant. So Trump saying, I would never telegraph what I'm doing, I'm never going to put that out there publicly, just simply isn't true. I think what Trump's strategy is right now, and I know everybody, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. He's trying to, one, scare Maduro out of power, and two, scare Maduro's generals into defecting against him. Neither of these things are likely to work, and my fear is that once they don't work, the true hawks who want regime change and are willing to send the U.S. military to do it, like a Marco Rubio, will take advantage, and they'll say, Mr. President, you tried, but you drew this red line. You made all these very bold statements. So now you have to do something. Now you have to get involved. Now you have to go into Venezuela. And so I think this is going to end up tying Trump's hands. But we have seen the administration leak to the press that they are preparing for strikes and operations against Venezuela. And so while Trump is now trying to present as, I would never say this, I would never telegraph it, I would never tell you, I think what he's really trying to do is throw this out there, get it into people's minds, make them think that the U.S. is going to war with Venezuela right now in order to facilitate a regime change in Venezuela. Now, even if this does work as Trump wants, it's going to be an absolute massive catastrophe for the United States of America. What Trump says at the end there, that Venezuela was sending their criminals to the United States, what they say that all the drugs are flowing from Venezuela to the United States. He says, every one of these drug boats we blow up, we save 25,000 American lives, which is obviously utterly and completely false. About 100,000 Americans die from overdoses every year. Trump has already blown up 16 drug boats, and so he's now at negative 3,000 American lives. Like, he's claiming to save more American lives than Americans are actually dying from fentanyl overdoses. So this is all clearly untrue in the present. However, if we orchestrate a regime change in Venezuela, which is certainly, look at every other regime change that we've done, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, it's made the countries poorer, more unstable, more a hub of transiting drugs. And so if there is ever going to be fentanyl trade actually coming through Venezuela, Currently, there is absolutely none, but if we're ever going to see that, it would likely happen after we had a regime change in Venezuela. So I think step one of the administration's plans is this psychological operation to scare Maduro out of power. Once that doesn't work, step number two is going to be starting bombings in Venezuela. Now, I think this is going to at least be a couple of weeks. The USS, I believe it's the Gerald Ford. It's the largest aircraft carrier that we have in our armada, is being deployed to the Caribbean. And if you look at U.S. military operations, typically they're only occurring when there's an aircraft carrier in the region. They're very, very important. The missiles that are launched from like submarines, like the Tomahawks and things, are much more expensive. So obviously they're going to want to have an aircraft carrier in the region. Now, I mean, there's a little bit more nuance here because Venezuela is so much closer to the United States than Iran, Yemen, Syria, Somalia, all the other countries that we bomb. But I really do think, and I really am concerned, once that aircraft carrier arrives, Maduro's still in power because all of these threats to overthrow him hasn't driven Maduro out of the country. Then Trump is going to resort first to land strikes in Venezuela. Now, this could get very complicated. The Venezuelans say that they're talking with the Iranians about obtaining drones that could fly 1,000 kilometers. I'm sure from the Iranian standpoint, this is going to be a win-win from them. Not only are they going to be able to sell their drones to another country, be seeing some profit, making some money off of that, but also they're going to be very happy that America is bowed down in their own hemisphere, that we're reallocating assets, military assets from the Mediterranean, like this aircraft carrier, and bringing it into the Caribbean. And from the Iranian perspective, this is going to be essentially Venezuelans killing and bleeding America on behalf of, for them, not really, but it kind of essentially, it's going to benefit Iran by taking away military resources and assets from the Middle East. So I really am concerned that we are looking, 2 or 3 months down the line here, that the strikes in Venezuela, maybe at first they do target some legitimate cartel targets in Venezuela, but once they run out of initial targets, and of course, as they work their way up what they think is the chain, then we're going to end up having a real problem with them killing members of the Venezuelan leadership. So we are, I think, very much headed to war in Venezuela. All right, I see a lot of you guys are very active in the chat. That's something I am very excited about. Make sure if you are in the chat that you subscribe to the show. Really appreciate it. Share it out. Get this out there to a few more listeners. Now, want to move on to Ukraine, where Lindsey Graham is making a statement that America is out of bombs, and he's very excited about it.
Speaking of Donald Trump, he said, hey, so he's a great president. If you don't believe me, just ask him. What happened with me and him was we found common ground. I've come to like him and he likes him, and that changed our entire relationship. But he did the Golan Heights thing. Remember, Ron? He said, I called him up, where you at? I'm with Bibi on the Golan Heights. He said, I didn't know we were in New York. No, that's another Golan Heights. We're over there. He recognized the Golan Heights by tweet because he understood you can't give it back to Syria because they'll use it to kill you. He recognized Jerusalem as capital of Israel. Why? Because if you got a problem with that, take it up with God. He's the guy that did it, not Trump. So I just want to say, I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes. Trump is my favorite president. We've run out of bombs. We didn't run out of bombs in World War II.
So the reason I want to bring this one up in the Ukraine section is because Lindsey Graham is actually hitting on something important here in his very, very lazy, bad stand-up routine. I'm pretty sure I've heard him do the Trump likes Trump joke before, so this isn't anything new. But the reason that this is important is he is highlighting a real issue here, that the Western stockpile of weapons is dwindling and dwindling. And while he's talking about bombs, it's not just the bombs, it's the missiles, it's the artillery shells, and most importantly, it's the missile interceptors. Recently, there was a report, I think it was in the Financial Times, that the Patriot interception rates in Russia, so the amount of times that a Patriot missile is fired at incoming Russian ballistic missile and actually takes out that missile, is 36%. And as Daryl Cooper previously explained on the show, when you're firing the Patriots, you really want to be able to have a 200% success rate, right? So they actually need 30 to fire 36 of those things to feel confident that they're going to shoot down the incoming Russian ballistic missile. This is an absolute catastrophe on the horizon for the Ukrainians. Now I got this clip of Zelensky to play, and I'll explain a little bit more.
To thank to all of you, to NATO structure and to leaders of your countries for the program Pearl. We are thankful to the United States and to President Trump personally that he didn't block this possibility to buy weapons from the United States, especially during the winter. It's for us it's important, of course, to have possibility Patriot to have Patriot missiles to save our civilian infrastructure, energy infrastructure. And of course, we are very thankful because without the money of your countries, of leaders who spend money for the program Pearl, it's unbelievable to buy anything. That's why we are very thankful. And of course, using this opportunity, we want to ask other countries also to join this program. For us, it's important. Yes, and of course we highly appreciate other European programs to support us. We have our bilateral security documents where we can count on some humanitarian support or air defense, and etc. I will not go further to details, but I think you know about it very well with details. So this is very important for us.
So I wanted to highlight this clip because it just shows how lost Zelensky is. He thinks that the Europeans and the Americans are going to give Ukraine tens of billions of dollars of weapons next year. That simply isn't going to happen. And even if the funding was there, the weapons aren't. As Lindsey Graham said, we are out of bombs. We're running out of bombs. And it's our entire military supply of really, really critical weapons. And so Zelensky simply doesn't understand that the bind that his country is in. And he is sitting there praising, thanking, doing everything he can to flatter the very people who put him in the predicament where he is going to lose hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Ukrainian lives in this conflict, large swaths of his country, right? Russia was willing to end this war in April of 2022 with Ukraine only ceding the Crimean Peninsula. The Donbass was going to continue to exist as Ukrainian territory. They would have been more autonomous, but as Ukrainian territory. And now Ukraine is going to lose Zaporizhia, Kherson, if not more, along with the Donbass and Crimea. So these people have cost his country so much by promising him everything, and they simply can't deliver it. The weapons aren't there. The supply chains aren't there. Our ability to produce functional military equipment in a timely manner to keep the Ukrainians fighting simply doesn't exist. And if you look at Israel, which Lindsey Graham is celebrating all the people we're killing in the Middle East, potential war with Iran, and potential war with Venezuela, the ability to continue to arm the Ukrainians is going to get lesser and lesser and lesser among the United States and our Western allies. So this is a really big deal that Zelensky doesn't understand this, and that he thinks the people sitting at that table are his friends. Those people used his country. they cost Ukraine at least 20% of its territory, and I mean a massive portion of its population, right? We talk about maybe the million or so people killed in the conflict, but millions and millions of others have fled and will never return to Ukraine. Ukraine's population has been absolutely depleted by not only Zelensky, but all those people sitting at the table with him who encouraged him to fight. Last week, a top NATO official, I think it was a Dutch general, said, "We will give Ukraine whatever they need for as long as it takes." We can't do that, right? It's like somebody who's absolutely broke and they keep telling their friend, yeah, I give you another $20. Eventually that money is going to run out and you don't have any more money to give them. And this is something that Zelensky still doesn't recognize. And if he doesn't recognize it, if he doesn't make a deal, Ukraine is just going to lose more and more and more. Right now, Ukraine could go to the negotiating table, certainly at a deficit, certainly not in a position of power with the Russians and Vladimir Putin, but in a position where they do have leverage, where they could still negotiate. Their military is still fighting. If he continues to fight until the Western arms supply completely runs dry, until there's no more interceptors to defend Ukrainian cities and critical infrastructure in their military supply lines and their training facilities for their recruits, if the Ukrainian military collapses and Zelensky is forced to sign the agreement that Putin puts in front of him, the deal for Ukraine is going to be much, much, much worse. And it doesn't seem that Zelensky understands this at all. And I do question if Donald Trump really, truly understands the problem here, because he's talking about selling more arms to Ukraine, again, as he's talking about going to war with Venezuela, knowing that Israel could drag us to another war with Iran, and that we've pledged to sell all these weapons to not only our European partners in NATO, but also all of our East Asian partners, all of our Middle East partners, and all the weapons that the United States needs as well. It's really, and I just want to take one more second to highlight this, it's really insane to me that you have a sitting U.S. senator who is giddy. I mean, I can't even say happy. He is ecstatic that the United States doesn't have more bombs. How would that be a good thing, right? If the world really is, as Lindsey Graham sees it, that we have all these enemies that we have to worry about, that China's ascended, that Russia, once they're done with Ukraine, they're rolling through the rest of Europe. Why would it be a good thing that we're out of weapons? The only way that makes sense is if Lindsey Graham is saying that with an absolute wad full of cash in his pocket from all of his backers in the military industrial complex, who are the only ones benefiting from this policy. All right, want to move on here and do a couple updates on the situation, Israel, Gaza, all of that. But before I do, very active chat. Love to see all of you guys in there. I'm going to jump to some of your questions once I'm done with the Israeli segment. If anybody has any more, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And make sure you're subscribed to the show, that you like the show, and that you share the show out. It's the only way that we could grow is with your support. All right, so on Israel. This is a story that really unfolded last summer when it came out that 5 Israeli soldiers had brutally raped a Palestinian man in the Seed Tamim detention facility. This is a well-known and notorious prison camp in Israel, that they've had thousands of Palestinians there. And after they were arrested, there was this massive protest. The protesters, with actually 2 members of the Knesset, members of the ruling coalition of the Israeli legislature, forced their way into the prison. After that happened, a video of the rape was released. It's showing the Israel, I don't want to get too graphic, but they used, I believe, a electric prod, and they shoved it up the man's rectum. And they did absolutely horrible, graphic. They beat him. Horrific what they did to them. So when that video was released, it did, I think, tamp down a little bit on the pressure in Israel to release the alleged rapists, the Israeli soldiers that had done that to that man. So fast forward to just a week ago, we got a resignation by the Israeli military advocate general. So this is the top legal person within the IDF. And she resigned, and she said that she authorized the release of the video. And I think this is important to note, not because it was so brutal and graphic and horrific, but because the right-wing protest in response to this was causing so many troubles and her prosecutors were getting threats. She thought the Israeli public, seeing that, oh no, really, there was a crime committed here, that this isn't some vendetta against innocent Israeli soldiers, would change the story a little bit in Israel. And I think that it did. And so that's where we're at now. Netanyahu's weighing in on it. So I have this this clip for you guys.
International legitimacy efforts are greatly benefited by the aura, the protection with which the justice system provides it.
Yesterday, the reservist charged with abuse appeared in public and accused Tomer Yerushalmi of spoiling their case.
You've done a field trial on us in front of the cameras, as if you've already decided who's guilty. We will continue to fight for justice for ourselves, for everyone who came out in uniform and defended our home.
This weekend, Tomer Yerushalmi briefly went missing, and police found her abandoned car with a note. Police later found her on a beach, safe but in distress.
The incident in State Taman caused immense damage to the image of the State of Israel and the IDF, to our soldiers. This is perhaps the most severe public relations attack that the State of Israel has experienced since its establishment.
So the reason I think this video is so important, first you had the military advocate general speaking, then you have the accused rapist speaking, and finally you have Netanyahu speaking. The reason I think this is so important is it just goes to show that the debate in Israel here isn't about how sick and disgusting the society is that not only allowed but defended the men who committed this act, but rather how bad it is that this came out and it's a PR hit. Netanyahu isn't saying this is the most significant atrocity committed by an Israeli or something horrible an Israeli has done. He's saying that the release of the video is a PR attack, right? Like, this is his issue, is with the PR attack. This is absolutely demented and very, very, very concerning to me. So the last update I have here, I have a journalist. He's with, I think, the Economic Center on Policy Relations, and he actually identified the Palestinian victim. And he points out a couple really important things. One is Israel released the man without charge or trial. So this necessarily, this wasn't a terrorist. This wasn't a member of Hamas who was engaged in the October 7th attack. And maybe you could say what they did to him was horrible, but just in the way Americans justify the waterboarding of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the Israelis would justify the waterboarding here. This is a completely innocent man, and they let him go. Second, he talks about the medical procedures that the man had to go through after the rape he experienced. He had I think his colon and his rectum both removed, had to undergo 20 surgeries for it. And now the man is terrified that the Israelis, I think they released him back into Gaza, are just going to assassinate him so they could wipe their hands of the problem, right? No story to tell, no victim left alive. And so that's, I think, what Israel is headed towards here. And if I were that guy, I would be very concerned that my life was in jeopardy as well. Just want to quickly update that the ceasefire is still barely holding on. Israel is violating it every day. They're supposed to allow 600 aid trucks into Gaza every single day. The most on any day that they have let in is 200 aid trucks. Now, the reason why that's important is those aid trucks were really supposed to provide relief to the people of Gaza. That's why Hamas agreed to the ceasefire. And we have report after report after report coming out from all kinds of international aid agencies and sources within Gaza saying that the humanitarian crisis has not lifted. The UN said that only 7% of Palestinians have been able to return to their home. And so that means over 1 million Palestinians are still living in overcrowded tent cities and damaged and partly destroyed shelters in the strip. It means that there's still a hunger crisis going on, that there are still children suffering from severe malnutrition within Gaza. And it still means that the hospitals are undersupplied. And so when Israel shoots or drops a bomb and there's people bleeding out, the doctors aren't able to save their lives. So the situation hasn't improved there, and Israel is killing Palestinians every day. Sure, at a far slower pace than they were before the ceasefire went into effect, but 3, 4, 5, 6 Palestinians every single day being killed by Israel. All right, now I want to get into a couple of your questions. I'll have producer Chris pop them up on the screen. I'll take a second to read them here and then give you my thoughts. This is from Kyle Matovic. Love this guy, great guy. He has a fantastic podcast, Liberty and Health. He asks, what's your thoughts on the Wagner group being sent to Venezuela? Seems like that might make Trump a bit more hesitant. I think it can actually go one of two ways. One way is Trump does get a little bit more hesitant. He realizes that even if they are able to scare some generals into wanting to overthrow Maduro, that the Wagner group is going to be loyal to Maduro, right? They're paid by Putin. Putin wants Maduro in Venezuela. And so he's got a set of bodyguards that really can't be influenced by the typical CIA means that they've tried to use in Venezuela. On the other hand, it could make Trump more likely to go into Venezuela because people are going to say, oh, we have to stop the Russian interference in our own hemisphere. This is the Monroe Doctrine. Come on, Trump, you got to stand up to it. You got to enforce it. And so on that one, I could see it going both ways. It just depends on who has Trump's ear. What's important right now is that the Hawks have Trump's ear. And so I think we're actually more likely to see that leading to an escalation rather than Trump saying, you know what, looking at the assessment, we can't get this regime change done, so we're just going to move on to a different project. Next question, Chris. So what is Pearl? Pearl? Or is that just the AdSense and he meant something else? I'm not sure what you're talking about there with that question. Next, we got what range has Venezuelan missiles? I'm sure they can hit Puerto Rico, but what about Florida? I know they have drones that can fly about 600 miles, which certainly puts U.S. assets that are immediately in Venezuela's coastal waters, like right in international waters, there at risk. I think Trinidad and Tobago are also within range. I don't know if they have more upgraded missiles or other things that they haven't been very upfront about, though. But 600 miles is the longest range I've read for any Venezuelan munitions. All right, up next we have, based on the NYT New York Times piece yesterday, given the options on the table, what is Trump's stance most likely course of action for attacking Venezuela? What will be the immediate and long-term consequences? And so I think if we end there, there's a couple options here, I guess. One would be that Donald Trump goes the kind of route he went for with Iran, which is, we're going to drop our biggest bombs on Venezuela. We're absolutely going to pummel them. We're going to hit all the targets we want without any warning in one single night, and then we will and then we'll get through it, and then this will be over. And the other option is the ratchet effect, which will be what I described earlier, where we go from hitting the drug boats to hitting targets inside of cartels inside of Venezuela, and then finally moving on to governmental targets inside of Venezuela. And then I did see the clarification. Pearl is that he's saying plural, PURL, and this is the program that NATO has put in place. And that program is a fund where the Europeans are donating to that fund, and then NATO is buying American weapons for Ukraine. So that's the plural that Zelensky is referring to. It's important to note that that fund only has $2 billion in it. At one point in time, Biden was sending Ukraine $2 billion in weapons every single week. And that $2 billion is going to last to the end of the year. And next year, they're thinking there's going to be between 12 and $15 billion in that fund, which is far short of the $60 billion that Zelensky says he needs. If we got another question, Chris, we'll do one or two more here. Next up here, is it a possibility that Trump and Putin have a deal to keep the conflict on a slow burn in order to weaken Europe, which would benefit both the US and Russia? I really don't think so. This is the way it's kind of played out, that the conflict has been on a slow burn and has led to a weakening of Europe. I don't necessarily think that Trump wants that, or that he's potentially that calculating. I don't think there's that many discussions going on between the US and Russia. I think this is really a result of Washington and Moscow both having a deep understanding of, we are the world's two largest nuclear superpowers. And if either side takes this too far, it means nuclear war. And as much as there may be some wants within the halls of the Pentagon who think a nuclear war could be won, everybody does truly understand that nuclear war can never be won, and that's why nuclear war must never be fought. All right, last question here, Chris. Do you think Zelensky is actually delusional enough to believe that he can ever win the war against Russia? I do think so. There's a couple reasons I think that. One, this man isn't somebody who has studied history. He was a piano playing comedian before he became president of Ukraine, a literal clown. Since he has become president of Ukraine, he's shown no signs of having deeper understanding of the conflict. And the last point here is just, I really do think I know a lot of people dismiss this as Russian propaganda, but I do think Zelensky has a cocaine problem. Anybody who's known someone with a cocaine problem knows that that they have delusions of grandeur, that they don't think rationally, that they could really get themselves in very problematic situations because they think they could achieve a lot more than they can. I think Chris is saying he has one more question he wants me to take, so we'll do that one. This is from Keith Knight, the great Keith Knight. What is the biggest lesson we can take away from the war on terror and apply it to the future? Well, Keith, I think that lesson should be Venezuela, that regime change operations don't work. That, as easy as it sounds, that if you kill Bashar al-Assad, if you kill Saddam Hussein, if you remove the Taliban from power or Muammar Gaddafi from power, that the situation couldn't get any worse. That these men are absolutely brutal, ruthless dictators who deserve to burn in the deepest pits of hell for what they have done to the people who live under their control. But it hasn't worked that way in any single one of the cases. It gets worse. We don't understand these countries. We don't understand complex societies like this. And when you go in and you just start killing people, when you start removing people from power, it completely upends the society. And you end up with the rise of the Islamic State, not only in Iraq, but Syria, but Somalia, but Libya, and even a presence in Afghanistan. I mean, the Taliban have re-seized power in that country. So that's probably the biggest failed regime change of all, because we changed the regime. We spent trillions of dollars in 20 years trying to build a government and an army for Afghanistan. And rather than actually getting rid of the jihadist presence in Afghanistan, you end up with a whole ISIS contingent there that's very dangerous. But then the Taliban end up back in power. So I think the most important lesson of the war on terror is that regime change doesn't work, and we need to apply that, and we need to look at Venezuela and think, Jesus, look at what happened in Syria. Talk about in Libya too, the migration crisis is that Europe experienced because of those wars, because of the instability there. Do you want that to happen in our own hemisphere, where rather than sailing across the Mediterranean Sea, these people are sailing across the Caribbean to the United States of America? This is a disaster that Trump, I think, is being led by Marco Rubio right into. He's bought it all the way, and it's a major problem. All right, everybody, this was a lot of fun. I like doing the Q&A. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Maybe we'll do some more in the future. Be sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's the best way to interact, to be able to, leave questions in the chat, recommend future guests and things like that. And also share the show, recommend it to people. We are battling the algorithm here, and all of your support helps. So thank you very much, and we'll be back with another show tomorrow.